This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. New Society Publishers is your gateway to a regenerative future. They're not just about books, they're about transforming lives and communities through the power of knowledge and action. Their mission is simple: to inspire and empower individuals to create a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world. They envision a future where every person has the tools and resources they need to thrive in harmony with nature, where communities are resilient and interconnected, and where equity and justice are fundamental principles guiding our collective journey. If you subscribe right now to their newsletter at newsociety.com, you'll be the first to receive sneak peeks at new content and get discounts on upcoming title releases. You'll even get an exclusive discount code on your first purchase of books, ebooks, or audiobooks. So sign up today at newsociety.com. Hey there everybody, and welcome back. So this last week has been incredible for me. After almost 5 years of being connected to different aspects of the work at the farm at La Junquera, first through my connection with Silvia Quarta, the leader of Camp Altiplano, the first of the Global Ecosystem Restoration Communities Network, back when I worked with them as the restoration coordinator, then through collaborations with Alfonzo and Yanniek through the climate farming community, and also then with their incredible staff of Clara, Jeronimo, and Jacobo in coordinating and organizing, I was finally able to visit them in person. Now in the first few days we did some course planning and taught a 2-day intensive on water resource management for farmers. Then I stayed for a couple of days to talk about their new collective project to restore the watershed of the Quipar River. And then I represented climate farmers in a Benchmarks soil health program. And it's been surreal to meet the heroes who are working tirelessly to pioneer regenerative management in their semi-arid location and to build friendships that go far beyond the occasional Zoom call. And that brings me today to our interview with Silvia Quarta. Now, she does a great job of explaining the context of the farm and her work right here at the beginning. So let's just jump right in. So to start, why don't you tell us where we are? Because we actually get to do one of these in person for a change. So yeah, give our listeners something of a orientation to where we're speaking from right now.
Yeah, so we are in the northwest of Murcia, which is the south of Spain. We're in my house and we are on the farm of La Junquera. So it's a very big regenerative farm and at a very high altitude. We're at more than 1,000 meters. So it's a very special place in terms of the views that you get and the climate that you get, because we are in Mediterranean climate, right? But we're very high, so it's very cold and very hot and very windy and wide horizons and very isolated as well. And yeah, we are around 8 people living here at the moment with Alfonzo and Yanniek, the owners of the farm, and their kids. And then, the rest of us is involved mainly in projects related to education and regenerative agriculture, both on the farm and off the farm.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. So tell me more about the unique little biome that we're in here at the Altiplano, the high plains in the southwest of Murcia.
The natural biome or the human biome?
Well, let's do both. Let's start with the natural and move on. Yeah.
Yes, it's a stepparian landscape, basically. It's actually on the farm. There's a bit of the land which is a forest, it's the one that we visited yesterday. And that's a kind of a pristine forest. So it's a Mediterranean whole oak forest, and there's a lot of herbs in between, and junipers and rosemaries and lavenders and thyme. So that's basically what grows naturally around here. But then the rest of the land is, it's been farmed for centuries and millennia, actually, since like Roman times. Also, there's most of the deforestation comes from those times, apparently.
Wow.
So the forest has been transformed into cereal field, and now there's also a lot of almond field and pistachios, and more there's also some intensive irrigated agriculture, horticulture, which is kind of destroying the aquifers of the region. Yeah, and I think that's a bit...
What are the biggest challenges that you face here? What are the things that make it difficult?
I think one is that we're very far from most things. So
Sure, from a social aspect, that's massive.
yeah, and that also has an impact on the market you can reach, right? And the people that can access this place physically. I think it's a choice for all of us to be in such an isolated place, and we'll enjoy it. But indeed, for example, selling the vegetables from the garden, it's not so easy, right?
Yeah, there's the transport alone will kill you.
Yeah. And climate is very extreme, which is, again, lovely and beautiful and wild. But it's also very challenging because there's only very few things that can grow with. We've had just now basically 3 years of drought. The average rainfall is 350 millimeters, supposedly.
Yeah.
But we have had rains again now in the month of November. But otherwise, the previous 12 months, we had like less than 100 millimeters. 0 rain in the winter, which should happen, but it hasn't happened in the past 2-3 years. And yeah, the fact that it gets also so cold in winter, and it makes for a very short season of growth and vegetation, springing.
Yeah, so I think another part of the context that we can put in, at least for this conversation, is that this is the day after a 2-day workshop that we kind of collaborated on water resources here that I've been giving. That's the main reason why I'm down here. And we got a chance to go and walk around and see so many of the installations that have emerged from both the farm's operations and the tons of different experiments and things that you've been trying as the head of Camp Altiplano, part of the ERC program. Tell me about how that initiative kind of started and when the installations began, what their intentions were, and how that integrates in with kind of a regenerative farming model for this challenging place to farm.
Yeah, I think we can start from Alfonso, which is the owner of it's a family farm, right?
Yeah.
And he's the youngest son of the family, and 12 years, I think, he came here. And it was a farm that was managed by one person, and none of the family of Alfonso was living here. And so they just had one guy on one tractor, and that was it.
Wow. And so real quick, so first I've done 2 interviews with Alfonso in the past. So if anybody's really interested in him telling his version of the story, we don't have to give all of his background. Yeah. But one thing that I've learned about the evolution of this farm is that they used to cultivate very different things back when. And the strategies have changed in different stages when markets were developed or lost for certain things to the point where it is now. Can you give us a little summary of that?
Yeah, so the farm was bought by his family in the 1800s, which is also quite crazy. For the production of hemp and esparto. Esparto is a grass that grows in this area naturally. Yeah,
they use it for like the soles of shoes and a few other
ropes.
Yeah, rope as well. Yeah, strong fiber.
It was furnishing like the whole Cartagena, like the harbor on the coast.
Oh, sure.
For ships and
it's a hardy clumping grass. It's pretty distinct in the ecosystem here.
Yeah, you find it also in Latin America in high
I didn't know that.
Plains on the Andes. I don't know if it's exactly the same variety. But yeah, so of course then cotton came in and nobody cared anymore about hemp and esparto.
Okay. Lost its value because of the new industry, yep.
And the whole farm was turned into cereal. And it became organic, I think, already in the 90s. And then indeed, when Alfonso came in, he saw, well, like the whole family was aware that the value of the land was going down in a way, was producing less, it was becoming more challenging. And so he got into regenerative agriculture, and he got into basically trying different experiments to see what else could be done, that it's not cereals in a very conventional way, although it's organic, right? So he started introducing different crops, and there's now indeed pistachios, almonds, aromatic herbs. There's a small apple orchard. There's a vineyard, which we planted a couple of years ago. So basically, on one hand, it was diversifying, and there's cows of also an endangered breed. So diversifying the farm, trying to have a lot of different crops, but also the way they're farming now is quite different, because indeed they're striving for being fully regenerative.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is, as you were saying, it's the management of water infrastructure. And on the farm, I think there's around 80 ponds for water retention. And there's a few kilometers of swales, and there's hedges that we've planted of bush and trees, native bush and trees for biodiversity, but also controlling erosion and giving space for...
Sure, planted on contour in a key line configuration, yeah.
Yeah, and also just on the edge of the field to diversify the plots.
Yep.
We've been doing reforestation on, I think we've planted on more than 12 hectares on the farm. Again, native species. And Camp Altiplano was born as one of these experimental areas.
Yeah.
So it started in 2017 from, indeed, the ERC movement, so the ecosystem restoration communities. And John Liu that had created this huge movement around the restoration of land with volunteers, so basically having people come, do the work, learn, and then leave and spread the knowledge. So this was the first camp established, because I guess through Common Land and then through Alvelal they reached, so all of these...
There's a lot of different connections here. It's kind of hard to map all of them if you're not involved with the organizations.
They reached Alfonso, and he was very willing to give a bit of the land, so it's 5 hectares and it's been rented out for free. So it's an independent association, the one that was managing Camp Altiplano. And it was run by volunteers, and the whole design, I think it was Daniel Halsey that did the first, and Jesus Ruiz. So I think it's the most pretty part of the farm.
It does really stand out when you see aerial images of it, yeah. Because what is around it is quite...
Exactly, and if you're used to different climate, then when you look at a picture of it, it's like, well, absolutely not impressive.
Yeah, that's true. Depending on what you compare it to, it still looks kind of degraded to something that bounces back quicker, has more moisture, and a more moderate climate. But compared to then what else is around it too, it just stands out like this little oasis on a map.
Yeah, and there's 5 ponds, there's swales, there's a permanent ground cover, there's mainly almond trees, because the initial idea was to build a system that farmers in the area could learn from, so replicate with their own crops. There's some aromatics, and there's buildings and infrastructures to host volunteers. Yeah. And in the past, so this year we've actually decided to stop with the volunteers program. So the land, of course, it's going to be maintained. But so until now we've had more than 2,000 people passing by, and organic matter has doubled. And the infiltration speed and rate at which water you hardly see any runoff, even in like big rainfall events where there's new rivers and floods around the farm. Of course, it's small, right? But I think it's a very beautiful example of what can be achieved. Yeah. And around it, there's also almond trees managed in different ways. So it's very easy to compare like the impact of these practices on like very close by areas. So we know we are doing great in terms of soil and biodiversity, but we're not doing great in terms of production. Actually, behind you, there's those 2 bags of the famous almonds of Camp, which is very little for what it should give. Right. But I still have the hope that over time things are going to change. And the trees have struggled for sure at the beginning. Yeah. So we know that leaving a permanent ground cover since the beginning with young trees in this climate is not really doable. It's
difficult. There's so little moisture that small amount of competition can set them back or prevent them from growing. Yeah.
Yeah. So indeed, Alfonso is basically implementing these things improved on his bits of on the rest of the farm, right? Yeah. And leaving strips of vegetation instead of fully covered with vegetation. Tilling much less than it's done conventionally, which is basically 7 or 8 times a year, and he's tilling maybe once or twice. Yeah. Yeah, so finding that balance. So camp, it's kind of what helps us try out things that you cannot try out on the farm. Right. Because then you're losing a lot, maybe in terms of production. But figuring out how to do it best. Yeah.
So one thing that I've really liked about watching this program grow up over the last years is that you've really maintained your feet on the ground, in the sense that it can't just be funded from outside, doing a bunch of experiments, things that wouldn't work for other people around here, but taking into account the context of how to keep these plantations that were done before the new direction of the farm. You can't just drop those and pick something up. It takes a long time for things to get established here, because of the challenges of the climate that you mentioned. So finding that balance makes it a really good case study, because it's much more approachable for people who are coming from conventional to see, I don't have to go cold turkey, all in, take big risks on these things, there is a transitional stage.
Yeah.
So with the goals of the farm moving forward and the many other projects that it is involved in, so what are there? Lighthouse, Common Land, ecosystem restoration communities, how many others? We're going to be with the benchmarks program this upcoming week. I'm sure you could name a ton more. What does it look like managing all these overlapping entities and collaborations and projects while also keeping a farm going too? I've just been very impressed to see how many crossover things that the team here is working on and it's somehow making it work.
Yeah. I think none of us is really aware of how it's being possible. No, I think on one hand we are a very good team, that it's solidifying more and more, and each one of us is finding our best job that we can do. It's something that we're good at and something that we enjoy.
Yeah.
So we are diversifying more and more amongst each other, right? So, of course, Alfonso is managing the agricultural part of the farm, the agricultural business.
Right.
Yanniek is managing the Regeneration Academy. And she's, very good at inspiring people, and she's does a lot of talks here and there, and
she sure is. She's all over the place,
here, and also with the crash courses, getting a lot of people that are.
There's that too. There's the Regeneration Academy as well, which is what brought me here this time. Despite the fact that, as you were mentioning, starting with the camp, that's how we originally met. It was like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Our communication through there, while I had a small role with that organization. Yeah. So much has changed in that time. Like, I don't want to get you off track, but along that line, what have been some of the standout learnings with the challenges over the last years? Like you said, mostly being in drought for the majority of the time we just mentioned. Dealing with so many different volunteers and students and organizations coming for tours constantly, being featured. There's been a lot of attention on this. What have been some of the main things you've picked up or learned from in this process?
To take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's one thing, because for multiple reasons, I guess one reason is because all of us are we have like a very strong inner motivation for doing what we do, so it's very easy to just go full in. We are very isolated, so it's very easy to just think about work, and we are working and living together, so it's very easy to indeed get sucked into this and forget there's a world outside. So I think that's very important. Yeah, and also indeed doing more of what you like, then things just are easier, and I've done a lot of things that I didn't necessarily enjoy, but it felt like they had to be done. Which, maybe it's also true partially. It's not like you can only do things that you love. But I think it goes back a bit to what I was saying, that it's working more and more, I think, because we're all finding like the niche where we feel comfortable in. And then it's a team that functions better. So I think, the human factor is very important.
One thing I've been really interested to see that I didn't know about this place before was kind of this configuration that the community has, where this is kind of an old abandoned pueblo that has been going under renovations for a number of years. There's now a couple of houses that are gorgeous. I really love the aesthetic of the open vigas, the lime plastered walls, the irregularity of these old buildings I find absolutely charming. And you all kind of like live in this little neighborhood here. What has that dynamic been like as it's brought in and, some people have left and...
It's... I always say it's a bit more of a family than a community. A lot of times it feels like it, because we all know each other pretty well, and at the same time we work together and we share a lot, but also we have our own spaces. And I don't know, it does feel a bit like family. Like we do share a lot of meals and time together. I'm sure it's also one of the powers of this place, the fact that we live here on the land and we are exposed to whatever happens, and the fact that we see each other every day. Also, of course, it's very different working online. There's people that...
It's been the opposite of what we do at Climate Farmers, right? Where we're all remote and get together once in a while.
Which is, I guess, brings different added values, but this is a life choice, no? It's not only a job, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, it's difficult because, as you were saying, there's people coming and going. Then you lose friends, and then new people come in, and you have to adapt again. And there's ups and downs. When things are not so good, then it's very difficult because it impacts all aspects of your life, and of course that happens too. Yeah, and we are still figuring out how to do it well, because of course there's also conflicts, and how do you manage that? I think it's quite important, and we've tried to have like meetings within the village. It never really worked, and I think we all like to be quite independent and spontaneous in how we do things, but also we are all more and more aware that we share a lot of spaces and things and responsibility. So there's the need for conversations.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's quite complex when you're that involved with people's lives. That includes work and other projects. It can be very difficult to separate things.
Yeah, and also that it's a private farm, right? And we're living here, and so also that it's not everyone has the same roles, and not everyone has the same. So it's an interesting experiment.
I would imagine. Yeah, so let's start talking about one of these really cool initiatives that you've started that we've had a few conversations about already, which is the restoration of the water catchment of the river Quipar, which comes out of a spring within stone's throwing distance from here. So I've seen this gorgeous map that gives a sense of the perimeters and some of the elements that are key to this top watershed of the Quipar River. But tell me about how this started and where it's at currently.
Yeah, so this is indeed what we're all jumping into, and we started working on this maybe a year ago. And I think the whole idea popped up in all of our heads separately, because indeed we are at the source of river, which is beautiful, and it's our drinking water, and it's also used partially for irrigation of a very small part of the farm. And it's very special to have a body of water in this area, right? So there's this little pond that it's where the irrigation water is collected, but it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
And the river kind of disappears into the land a few kilometers after the spring.
Yeah.
The flow of the river has gone down from 20 liters per second of like 20 years ago to 4 liters per second.
Wow.
Of course, it's changing throughout the seasons, but that's the average. And we just found out last year that the level of nitrates in the water is on the verge of not being drinkable. And we should definitely do tests again soon. And the river runs through a very beautiful valley where there's a lot of abandoned farmhouses, and all of us separately have driven through that valley, and all of us separately had thought, wow, can you imagine how beautiful it would be if there would be more projects like us in this valley, and more people doing different things, and everyone in their own way, and that there's this whole spreading of the river and the community over there. So that was one thing. And then, of course, the urgency of the water level going down and the contamination of the water, which is impacting us very, very directly.
Yeah.
So we thought that we need to do something with the rest of the people that live in this catchment, because indeed we can only do this much.
As much as 1,000+ hectare farm can do a lot, it's not a fraction of the area of the catchment.
Yes, the catchment we're focusing on, it's the first half of the river, and that's 30,000 hectares.
Yeah.
So indeed, 1,000 is only a tiny bit, even if it's a lot already. So we are organically moving forward in this whole idea with a lot of different, let's say that we have a few strategies, right, that we're following, and they're focused on one hand, offering trainings and education to people. We do education with school kids. We do like the training you just came for on water retention, and we offer trainings on regenerative agriculture, and also indeed raising a bit the awareness around these issues. Then we work on offering an alternative system, because also we are aware that you cannot go to people and tell them they're doing things wrong, and that serves nothing.
Yeah.
So we are just, the farm is a beautiful and huge example of how to do things differently. and how to counter, how to not go against the flow, which is people abandoning the countryside, farms being less economically valuable, and farmhouses falling apart and being destroyed. So here we're going the opposite direction. There were 0 people living in this village. Now we are 8. There's even 2
and
kids.
young people, yeah.
The houses are being fixed and new houses are being built. The farm is functioning and it's diversified. So if now it's been indeed 3 years without harvest of cereals for the drought, which is crazy, but then you have the almonds and then you have the aromatics. So I think, we're all aware that offering an example is the most powerful thing you can do. And not only in terms of agriculture, but also in terms of business, how to sell then these things differently.
Live off of this.
Yeah, and how to create how to create an added value to the products. Then we're working on research, because also we know how important it is to have data. So we're collaborating, for example, which is the National Research Institute based in Murcia. There's a PhD now based on this watershed, focused on drought and floods prevention. And it's a participatory research, so basically together we're trying to figure out from the people from the area, what do they think are the best practices that would prevent and reduce the impact of floods and erosion and drought. And we are also looking into the legal aspects of protecting the land and protecting the water in a sense that there are already laws, and there's some areas next to the river are protected areas, and the ecological flow of the river should be protected, but then in practice things are not taken care of.
Laws are one thing, consequences are another.
Yeah.
You can put anything on the books, but if you can't enforce it, it's no good.
Yeah, so we are looking for advice on that side and how to go forward with that. Also, we understand it's a very delicate issue. We cannot just push for... it's very delicate. It's water. People are making a lot of money out of it, right? Of renting out these plots to produce vegetable crops, and people are making a lot of money because they're renting out these lands.
Yep.
So it's a very big thing.
Yep.
And so these are a bit our strategies, and one, which is the one I'm most engaged with, and it's the one I really enjoy, is restoring the identity also of the valley. And
what does that mean to you?
It means, first of all, finding out what connects people to this place and to each other, and then finding a way to bring that back. Maybe bring back even a certain type of pride, right? Of being from this specific area, which is always, everyone says that it's a very, the edges of this area and the culture of this area is very blurred, because it's between lands. We are on the edge of the provinces of Murcia and Almería, so it's in between 2 provinces. We are
in between some cities and towns.
Exactly. Yeah. We are in the high plains, so it's Murcia, but it's very different from Murcia.
What people associate with the coast and the city itself. Yeah.
So there's an identity which is very very specific to this area, but in a sense it's also not so clear. Like maybe people don't find so much pride in saying, "Well, I'm from the northwest." No,
or just how to distinguish themselves from the things that they border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a part of this work is, and why do I believe that can bring something good, is because, of course, if you feel more connected to your land, then you also want to protect it more, and and you care for it more, and maybe you can also see it with new opportunities in it, and basically on the long term, like what we envision in 20 years, it's a valley which, of course, is where at least the ecological flow has been stabilized, where there's more space for the river, where there's more natural areas, but also an area where there's more people, and an area where there's more businesses that are producing and selling local stuff, and more local economy, and even maybe, I don't know, like the Valle del Quipar brand, right? That tells you that everything that you see within the brand is produced in a valley which is taking care and bringing back the water and the biodiversity on the land, and the culture, and on all levels, in the economic level, on the environmental level.
So look, I'm right there with you with all the excitement about the potential here, but you also have unique experience in working with the organization that has done similar things like this, Avelal, right? The idea being that creating more community and collaboration within this 1,000,000 hectare region that was selected by the program with Common Land has resulted in the creation of brands and processing facilities, cooperatives and such, which are trying to bring an extra sense of identity, pride, quality to production here. So I can definitely see how you're thinking about that with even a smaller, more local region of your own. But what experience have you seen in watching Alvelal grow and get established that makes you think that this is something achievable?
Yeah, I think the fact that it's huge because we're talking about 30,000 hectares, but at the same time, it's a manageable scale. And we feel there's very clear boundaries which are very real, which is water. Where does the water flow? So I think, of course, every territory is different. So Alvelal has a lot of impact, especially in the area of Granada, I would say. And we are just like on the edge of their region.
Okay.
So it might also be, of course, it's different people and different reactions and different. But I think this is happening. I don't know. There's more interested in this more and more, and the fact that we talk about watershed level is very tangible in a way, and the impact can be very tangible, and it's very much needed now. Of course, 3 years of drought, and then this crazy floods on the coast. People are aware that this is happening. So I think it's maybe really the good time to offer alternatives. And Alvelal has been doing that for, I think, also more than 10 years. And it is indeed a great example to see also in which direction you should go and which things work and which things don't work. And especially the part of the like the cooperatives or like the way in which you sell the products and how do you bring people together there. There's a lot of how to do it in a way that really works for everyone. I think that's a big challenge.
Do you have a fairly clear vision in your mind for what this Quipar Valley could look like if it reaches its potential?
Yeah, we've done this a lot of times. I think we see it's going to be beautiful.
What does it look like to you?
It's very lively and greener than now, and definitely much more forest and more riparian areas that are also restored, so they're easing. So you have to picture that right now parts of the river are the land has just been plowed and they are planting over it, so the river disappears. It's
gone subterranean because it's been moved so much on its surface.
And of course when it rains more, then the fields get flooded, but they just kind of
that happens so infrequently here so far that it's the rounding error.
So I see those areas being recovered as riparian areas with vegetation and animals. Also, there's some marshes that are where you find that they do exist right now, where you find species that are also very peculiar species in the region. And I think, giving more space to all of those areas would be very beautiful. Yeah. And would also bring, of course, a huge value to the area. So that on one hand, and then on the other hand, of course, still a lot of agriculture. We always picture also more animals grazing throughout the valley, so also moving from one place to another, because now there's sheep, less and less, because it's very harsh and economically not so viable.
Turns out they still need plant matter to eat.
Exactly.
There's not that much plant matter.
Exactly. So what if we can have more people that want to be shepherds and younger people that are actually also taking care of this together, so that there's the flocks that are just going through the valley and eating through different lands and more pastures, and also a place where there's buildings that are being restored, and then there's more people living. Of course, I imagine more young people, but it would be amazing to have people of all ages, right? Mm-hmm. And more businesses coming up, and then a lot of more exchange between people within the valley. So it would be amazing to have a meal with the bakery, and it would be amazing to have a someone that produces wine and beer, and another farm that produces
all the
oil
essentials in life, yeah.
Bread, wine, and oil.
Yep, pretty much. That's what's gotten these communities by for quite a long time. Beyond this vision, I can tell you've thought about it from a number of different perspectives and at different levels. How clear has that been of a communication between your collaborators? Have there been new ideas? Do you feel like you're all on the same page? Has it been something that's been difficult to achieve?
So we're very much aware that things can only go forward if there's a shared vision.
Yeah.
But also we don't want to... So we are, from La Junquera and the Regeneration Academy, we're pushing this process, but also we don't want to own it.
Yeah.
So we have had different workshops with different stakeholders where we're looking into the vision. And we are sharing our vision and asking them what do they think about this vision. Yeah, so we don't want to impose a vision.
Right.
Of course we have one, right? But we also want to build it together so that whoever partners we're collaborating with, we are sure that they actually feel like it's their project as well. And I think that's very important. So we are collaborating with the municipality of Caravaca, with civil associations of like environmental associations, with this research institution, and all of them have been involved in kind of co-creating this vision. And then what we're doing now is also reaching out one-to-one to inhabitants of the valley, to people that are working here, to people that own land here, to people that farm, to people that have a bar, to anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ask and listen to them, basically, so that we can incorporate their visions for the future and their needs and their challenges into this vision. And it's not only our vision, but it is a very much a participatory one. So we're talking about all kinds of problems, but of course we're talking a lot about soil and water issues, because that's what we mainly want to work on, but we're aware that all kinds of social issues are also very important.
What have been some of the main things that have come out of this effort? Because you said you've been really enjoying the stakeholder management, as it is sometimes very coldly called, which is really building relationships in the area that you care to focus on. What does that process look like, and what have you been learning from it?
Yeah, it's another messy process where we try to get, you call people and you ask for an interview and they get a bit scared, and then it's clear that doesn't really work, and then I go to the bar and then I have a beer there, and then you talk with one person, with another person, and then they start being curious, but what are you doing? But this, like, just showing your face and listening, I think that, so we've just started in a way, right? But I think that two things that are coming out the most is that people feel very grateful for being listened to, and that, but also that there's a huge feeling of helplessness, that many people see very similar problems.
What are the main things that come up?
Yeah, the fact that it's a very challenging area where there's no economic infrastructure, where it's very difficult to do new things because there's a lot of laws and regulations that tell you that you cannot build a new house, build processing facility. So
that's worth mentioning, right? Just how big of a factor the bureaucracy and the legislation is, not just here. I find the same thing where I live in Catalonia. It seems like it's quite common around Spain, and I would imagine very much so in other parts of Europe as well, that this really can serve to tie people's hands and limit even ambitious projects or optimistic endeavors that people might have. There's just so much red tape and so many hurdles to jump through that oftentimes you can completely lose your motivation and your energy just in the attempt of starting.
Yeah, which I understand it's a protective measure, right? To protect the land and natural areas and whatever. But indeed, then it makes it very hard for people to be inventive, no, and to create new things. And the same goes for the agriculture regulations. We had one of these gatherings with shepherds, and they were all absolutely agreeing on that it needs less bureaucracy, and that to get the European subsidies, your hands are tied indeed. That if you do things the way that you can, like, then you cannot enter in many areas, you cannot feed your sheep with certain stuff, you cannot. So it's indeed this level of regulations which come from supporting and helping people, but it's actually creating many times the opposite outcome. And that's a big problem.
So we've talked about kind of a lack of hope or opportunities, and then the difficulty of bureaucracy and regulation. What are some of the other common or standout responses that you've got from speaking with locals around here, getting to know the community better?
There's a lot of awareness around the water issue. Everyone knows that there's water being extracted, too much water being extracted from the aquifer, and that it's big companies that come in and rent the land and take the water and process their stuff outside of here. So again, it's a completely extractive, right? No money stays in here. No people from around here work with these companies. They bring buses of
seasonal workers
from an hour away from here.
Sure.
So everyone sees that, but then indeed and everyone also sees the climatic events becoming more extreme.
Yep.
The winters not being really winters and the summers being too much of a summer.
And longer. So everyone also is very aware of that. For then it's difficult to have agreements is on the solutions, right? Then what to do about it. Yeah. So the common ground is knowing what the problems are or the things that they would like to see change. And then there's divergence when it comes to finding solutions or putting forth ideas.
Yeah, I would say so. And again, we just started, right? So we're hoping to gather more points of view. But indeed, I don't know, we've had conversations about, actually maybe here most people agree on this, the rivers should be clean. And that's one of the big problems.
Let's go for a second into this concept of clean here in Spain, because it is a thorn in my side. This idea that land should be clean, and what clean means is bare earth everywhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's your garden, whether it's your farm, whether it's your riparian zones. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so on the farmland, I think indeed it probably came with machinery on the land, and then it's a matter of pride to have a tractor, and it's a matter of pride to plow your land.
Yeah.
And then
whoever has the least amount of vegetation on their plot or any weeds is a good farmer, right?
Exactly.
That's good
custodianship. You're taking
custodianship.
care of it.
Right.
If you leave it with grasses and wild stuff growing on it, you're not taking care of it.
And in case anyone's not familiar with what this looks like, it's essentially a moonscape. And if you're growing perennials on it, like olives or almonds or pistachios, which are the common things around here, that's it. They're in straight rows, not in any respect to contour of the land. And there's nothing in the understory. It's all just bare dirt. And here, what that means is very calcium-rich, very light-colored earth that basically reflects the sun. It's extremely bright. In some cases, almost white.
Yeah, I was shocked the first time I came here. Indeed, it's this beige, light beige, white soils for hectares and hectares.
And soil is a nice thing to call it, too. It's dead mineral subsoil because all of the topsoil has been gone for a long time.
Yeah, so in a way the cereals are actually the best crop because the perennials are, in theory they're better because they're perennials, but then because the soil is tilled constantly, then you have a tree, but then on the soil you have nothing.
It's really tricky like that, right? Because you could easily see the non-context specific argument that perennial crops are going to be better for the land. You don't need to work them as much. They're there all the time. But if you're going to plow everything underneath it, it doesn't make that much difference than if it's an annual cereal crop. In fact, oftentimes there can be more photosynthetic activity in a space with a seasonal wheat crop or something than there is covering the earth on an agroforestry plot. It's very counterintuitive. Yeah,
and indeed the cereals are covering the land throughout the whole winter and until June, July. So you actually have a few months
sometimes
of
less erosion. And there's at least a root covering it. The other thing too that I've noticed with these systems is that I lost it. What was I going to say about these systems? So we talked before too about succession, and it makes sense to have what is essentially a early succession annual crop like grain or there's lots of other annuals. in the types of basically mineral subsoil that they're farming on. And then when you try and get later succession food-bearing trees into the system, but the soil is at basically just being able to grow some mosses and some weeds, then you're trying to force this otherwise much more delicate later succession species to thrive in dead soils. And so it, in many different ways, it breaks the mold of this generalized idea that perennials are always going to be better for a space. They're definitely pushing the limits on that.
Yeah, and for me it's a very complex thing to understand, right? Because of what we see. Well, of course, when we talk about perennials here, and these trees are mainly almond trees and pistachio trees, which to my understanding, they're coming, from at least the almond trees from Asia, and I think from a climate which is probably Mediterranean.
And pistachios are from Iran, yeah.
Yeah,
so basically the Altiplano of Central Asia.
Yeah, so I can imagine that they do grow, like you see the forest here many times, is that there's a tree, there's a bush, and then there's patches of bare soil. So they are used to this type of climate and these type of soils, and maybe not so much competition, but
not planted in monoculture with no substrate.
Exactly, and and also when you walk into the forest here, there are indeed those naked and bare patches, but then where you see a bush, you usually see three.
Yeah, there's all these little clumps and clusters around. I would also argue that has as much to do with the fact that there's very little wildlife established on even wild spaces around here, that an animal impact would be necessary to manage the growth of those shrubby, kind of dry, aromatic type of herbs and to bring grasses back. And it would be capable of supporting that, but it would require adequate animal impact. So that might be the ideal configuration, because I know at least the more delicate, higher producing varieties of almonds that are common around here, usually if you're not going to irrigate them, need to be planted in areas of about an average of 800 millimeters a year. And here in a good year, you're getting, 350? Yeah. Right? Yeah, so, and most of the almonds are planted in secano without irrigation. Yeah. So, to me, though obviously they can survive and they can produce, they're already outside of their range. Yeah.
Well, but if you think then economically, for example, I know that I'm very bad with numbers, so I might be wrong, but what I know is that the profit you make from 1 hectare of cereals here, it's 100 euros. The profit you make with 1 hectare of almonds, it's in the range of 1,000 and 2,000 euros.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've heard people struggling so much with almonds because they're not getting those prices. Maybe it's different from the almond regions that I know in Catalonia than to here.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think they're doing quite well, and the pistachios even more.
I mean, there's tons of investment in it.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, partly just before coming here, I was meeting with some potential clients from an investment group that Alfonso is helping to manage, and that's what they're going all in on, is almonds and pistachios. Yeah. And I get that it's a higher value crop, but it's so interesting because the dynamics of this can be different in the same country. Yeah.
Yeah, so you might want to double check these numbers with Alfonso, but that's what I have.
I don't doubt it. Yeah, and I haven't been looking into almonds long enough to really know where things change in different areas. But I would also be very interested to know the overhead costs of getting those profits, right? Because if your overhead costs are so much more, is that net or is that gross profit, right?
No, I think it's
net.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's, again, all the more reason to look into the economics of these things, too, because it is an extremely important factor when making these decisions.
Yeah, of course.
So going back to the conversations that you've been having with people in the region, where have you been finding ideas and inspiration that perhaps you hadn't considered or you hadn't heard discussed, even in an innovative little hub spot like La Junquera? Have you been finding any people who are inspired and looking at new things?
Within the valley?
Within all the people that you've spoken to. Yeah, at least representative of your population that you have here.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Really? I find that surprising. I mean, you've spoken to probably hundreds of people now.
No.
Not informal... Not informal interviews, but just since you've been here over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the experimental plots that I know of are the ones of people growing truffles.
Okay. That's another one that I would think needs much higher average rainfall than we get here. Because they grow truffles around where I live. And that is, like this year we got over 100 millimeters, or 800 millimeters.
Yeah, so they do need a bit of irrigation. Because they need
irrigating
to
truffles, man.
be like moist in...
But it's working?
It's working. Yeah,
Okay.
I know a guy that has them and is doing quite well.
And what species does he plant them with?
Oak trees.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know you can pair them with hazel and I thought almond as well, but maybe not.
I don't know. Here they do it with with.
I thought I saw something in Croatia
eggs.
where they're planting them with almonds as well, but it might have been hazel. I could be wrong. Yeah. That's interesting.
So that I absolutely don't know how much money you can make, but that could be an alternative for certain. If we're looking at
anything to diversify a little bit,
exactly.
Right?
If we're looking at alternatives also for irrigated areas, then why not? And and there's a couple of people that grow truffles, but for the rest,
any little smaller cottage industries?
Yeah, there's actually this quite young couple that just started having sheep. I think they moved in the region. I haven't met them yet in person, but they moved to the region and they have sheep. So I think they're also maybe a bit more innovative as they're freshly starting, right? They're not coming from a family of shepherds. And
right,
this and that.
right. Already entrenched in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's more, but it's all pretty static.
Yeah. Kind of looks bleak.
And the innovation indeed is, we're planting aromatics.
Right.
We're planting almonds. So like changing
That's already the new stuff.
Yeah. Changing from the cereals to something different.
Gotcha.
And the aromatics are quite great, I think, because yes, they are plowed, but they are perennials that create a very thick, dense row, right? So you have a very good erosion control in place, unless you plant them downhill, which
they definitely do.
Which for sure can happen.
Yeah.
But I think they have a very good potential in that sense. And of course, the whole biodiversity and pollinators and all of that story.
Sure. Do you think that the trajectory that some of these industries are in right now are going to contribute or have the potential to contribute positively to this vision that you have for the catchment of the watershed?
These industries as in?
The different cultivars that we talked about. Just, do you think there's a way of, I don't want to say manipulating, but working with kind of the status quo of what is being planted now, what people are investing in, because especially if you invest in something like food or fruit trees, people are going to need to keep that established for decades, right? So is that in any way compatible with the vision that you have collectively here for the valley?
Yeah, I mean, the La Junquera is having these crops and is planting these type of crops, and it's about what I imagine that can happen, or what I hope that will happen, is that people will start implementing different practices, right?
Yeah.
So here and there, tilling a bit less, here and there, planting a hedge of diverse trees and bushes, here and there, making a little pond, a swale,
Yeah.
So we hope to get into that direction. And then even better would be, of course, to find a couple of farmers that do want to do it all fresh and all regenerative and all amazing.
Of course.
And then you have like more pilot farms, that can show what you can do in a different way. But it's more realistic to imagine that it's going to be like a slow implementing different things here and there.
Yeah.
And of course, we're offering the knowledge, right? And we're also aware that finding funds in that direction would help a lot, because if you could give a farmer money to plant those hedges or build those swales or those ponds, then it would be a nice start.
It definitely helps out, yeah, because right now everything that they're paid to do is often the worst stuff for the viability of their land.
Yeah.
The conditions for getting the subsidies from the Common Agricultural Policy, the PAC in Spanish, are very much limiting in what you can do as far as innovation. There's just some baseline things that if you're not down with that, you risk what for most farmers around here is a massive part of their annual income. Yeah. So that's also another big hand on the scale. that
Yeah,
throws off the balance.
Yeah, and I think it's between 40 and 60% of a farmer's income.
Very often, yeah.
So that's a lot.
That's something you can't risk even if you would like to try something different, right? So as I often say in many different circumstances around working with water here, we're not even at the point where we're talking about incentivizing best practices, but trying to de-incentivize the active opposite. Yeah, it's very frustrating to be in these early stages where we're not even breaking even, right?
Yeah.
We're just trying to slow down the destruction.
Yeah.
So that paints it as a bit of a grim picture.
No.
Let's go the other way with that. So you and the team here have been taking on different roles in getting this watershed management project off the ground. Tell me about what the process has been like so far. Obviously, you've been speaking with a lot of local people within this watershed. What other pieces are moving? What are you finding about the possibility of being able to work on this scale?
Yeah, so one other big task is, of course, looking for funds.
Yep.
And we believe there's quite some interest, especially in projects at this scale. No, much more interesting than one farm is a whole catchment.
Yes.
So we are applying for European projects, for private funds, for this and that, and grants and whatever. And of course, those would help us on one way continue with this process and have money for implementation and just bring it forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and we're working, as I was saying, we're offering these trainings already. So both for people from anywhere, but also for farmers from around the area. And last spring, we had a couple of trainings with quite some farmers from the area. And yeah, in this last training, there were most people from outside. So we're also still figuring out what's the best way to reach them. Maybe doing them outside of this farm, I believe. Maybe doing them in the weekend, maybe maybe not in this season because farmers are very busy now, seeding and all of that.
Right.
So offering that educational bit, and then one idea was indeed to find investors and people that do want to buy land in the area and that we can manage regeneratively.
Yeah.
So that would be like the urgent, easy way out of having companies destroying the water.
Right.
So if we manage to find people interested in of course with, we're looking at investment funds or private people, but with a certain set of values, right? So that they don't want a return of immediate profit and they don't want to just increase the value of the land and then sell it. And they don't want, so all these things.
There are other metrics and impact that they're working towards, yep.
And and that would save some water if we, if we manage to
Absolutely.
to have that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then all these projects indeed with the municipality of Caravaca, talking about soil health. We're gonna sign in spring next year a soil manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the reason why we're talking to all of these people in the valley, it's also to write a list of actions basically with all the different stakeholders that are part of this system, of a list of actions of stuff that will be done and we will do and everyone will do to improve the condition of soils. So we are doing these workshops we just did one indeed with shepherds. So it's talking about what's the current situation in terms of soil and land use and what are the biggest challenges and what are the problems and how would you solve it, and finding out all of these elements. And yeah, that's a bit where we're at.
Okay. I'm really looking forward to watching this project evolve because I've told you that I'm hoping to do something similar, although the river that runs past my property is much smaller and the watershed is much more manageable relatively. There are very few models that anybody can follow. You guys are making it up as you go. And it's going to be such an asset for those of us who have similar visions to be able to learn from your experience and your successes and your learning curve. I think it's really valuable. I hope that we can find a way to document and communicate this to people. Yeah,
indeed. We're also want this to be not an example in the sense that like setting the bar, but a bit indeed
somebody charting a path,
and sharing everything that we're doing and everything that we're learning and what worked, what didn't, and being able to achieve it and share with everybody else.
Well, so even though the project is nowhere near where it's headed, what have you learned in getting an organization or an initiative like this at this scale started? What would be some of the first things that anybody else interested might have to start to investigate or research in order to understand about how they can take steps forward and get something like this off the ground?
Yeah, I think one of our big internal policy is to avoid conflict, although we are very much aware that conflict is there, and you also need to leverage the conflict and understand why is the conflict there. But we have seen association and organizations that, you know, that fight for example, environmental protection, never getting anything out of it.
Right.
And with this, I'm not saying that I think it's stupid. I absolutely believe it's needed, and thank God they exist. But they play a role, which is that the one of being the pain in the ass, the one of bringing it to attention of the municipality or whoever.
It's definitely an antagonistic relationship.
Exactly. Right? And we are aware that if we also play that antagonist relationship, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So we're also trying to talk to anyone involved, although we haven't yet talked with anyone from these big companies.
Sure.
And I don't know what can we share with them, but thinking of offering solutions rather than complaining about what's not working, and then what your
gripes are and how they should change them, rather than how you guys might be able to work together to achieve common goals.
Exactly. So I believe that the fact that we live here and this farm exists, it's a huge extra point, right?
Of course.
Because it's we're doing it. So we're not talking about something.
You're not coming in and preaching, you should do this. This is what we're doing. Maybe we can do some cool things together.
And listening, it's huge. And as I was saying, people are happy to be listened to, and people feel important all of a sudden. When nobody's listening to them, the farmers, the shepherds, it's like, we're just left in a corner. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So just the fact that you talk to them and you listen, I think I hope, it's what will make them a bit more curious about all of this.
I mean, it definitely seems to be the case. And I got to say, so not only have I admired your work from the beginning with Camp Altiplano, but also seeing and hearing about more of this since being here and the different things that have happened over the years, it's just been such a pleasure to come and spend time here, get to know you and others who I've kind of had a distant friendship from now, and strengthen these connections. Look at opportunities for more collaboration. I mean, the workshop went quite well. So now we're talking about what a series of more in-depth water workshops could look like here in the future.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. It's not a small achievement, even though I can only imagine how slow it seems over these years when, you don't get the harvest, and this project didn't work out as you hoped, and there just wasn't enough rain to get this thing going. I've been in situations like that. I know how frustrating they are, but you guys have really made an example here collectively by doing the thing that I think is most underrated in the regenerative projects that I have profiled and interviewed and visited over the last handful of years, which is you've really put your own skin in the game. Right? And I have no doubt that it's a big reason why you've gotten the recognition and the respect from the local community that I see being much more difficult to achieve or to navigate from projects that are much less like this, that are not living in the place, that aren't dependent on an income from the project, but rather there's a distance where, we did a design, we hand it off to them, is much more common from what I've seen. And so, This is a really inspiring example.
Well, thank you.
It's no small achievement, even though I know it sometimes feels like it's not moving as fast as you'd like. But I've been blown away since I'm here. It's been such a joy to get to know you better, and I can't wait till we find new opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, I'm also very happy to have had you here, and also to finally have an expert that can tell us how to improve all of this water management that we're doing.
We're all on a learning curve together. Well, look, like I said, I've done other interviews in the past, both with Alfonzo and Yanniek, which I'll put links to for people to gain some other perspectives on everything that's going on here. And I have no doubt that not only will I try and grab another interview from here before I leave, nice. But that we'll be in touch very soon again, and we'll have some other updates.
Great. Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to everything that's coming.
All right. Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.